is this you mentioned it's a training issue, right? And so one of the things that has happened that's come out of the uprisings and sort of this movement for accountability and racial justice ostensibly has been the DOJ and certain city police departments entering into agreements around reform. Two of those cities were Louisville after Breonna Taylor was killed, and Minneapolis after George Floyd was murdered. And just yesterday, I think it was, the Trump administration announced that they're no longer doing that. They're not entering into that agreement. Yeah. Can you talk about the significance of that, how that might connect to is the type of training that you're talking about the type of things that the DOJ might be looking at providing for police, or is that even outside the scope? What do you think is happening there? What type of trainings do you think reform might be necessary, if any at all? You know, and I'm an abolitionist. For people talking, I'm a police abolitionist. I think the way we do policing needs to fundamentally change.
Right.
So I don't know that there's any reform anyway.
Well, if we go back 5 summers when there were cries for abolition and then for reform, whatever, I said we have my take on it is we have never, in good faith and actual effort, attempted true reform. So saying reform doesn't work I don't think that's accurate, because we've never tried it. But because we've never tried it, it's a bankrupt system, right? So I think that from talking to lawyer friends that I know who've been involved in kind of police accountability, those consent decrees, they are something to be used, tool. But it's really easy to slap paint on a rusty car, right? And so what was interesting,
we're really good at that too. Yeah. We're really good at being like, oh, look at this performance. We took a knee with Kente cloth. We got a Black Lives Matter sign in our yard, and qualified immunity though. We're not gonna take a look at that.
Well, and I think it was interesting reading about other cities that had previous consent decrees. And you don't get there because you meant oops once. Like, you get there because, like, the Minneapolis Fire Department had a 30-year federal injunction, not because one person said something racist 30 years before, but because decades of resistance and outright racist, dumb behavior got caught. They got caught in federal court. So the other places that have been held to consent decrees, I think there have been some reforms, some progress. How much of that is window dressing? How much does the money go away? How much are you changing the overall approach or mentality of policing? So talking to lawyer friends who are more on kind of holding police accountability, on some level, the city doesn't want to open up its own liability for having a police force that has done rogue things for years. So I don't, so I was interested yesterday seeing, and I'm trying to limit how angry I get every day. Like, I couldn't really listen to the press conference where Mayor Frey and Chief O'Hara were talking, because they were basically saying Trump can do what he wants, but we're still committed to trying to make things better.
Yeah, that doesn't instill a whole lot of faith in me. From those two,
but it's better than saying, "Oh well," right? So
yeah, absolutely.
And I think those, and because Frey's such a target, and I don't know if you followed last week, I think it was, where Councilmember Jenkins and O'Hara and they did kind of like this unity in the community, and they kind of walked.
I saw something about it. Yeah,
they walked down Chicago and met at that evangelical church kitty corner from Cup Foods or Unity Foods.
Yep.
So on the activist side, people were losing their shit. Like, it's like, because there were a lot of cops walking, and it was peaceful and all that. But a lot of the people who've been holding it down there were like, this feels like an incursion, right? This is Did you go over to the right wing Minneapolis is burning Facebook group or whatever, and it's this worthless police chief and this shitty mayor are in there among the gangsters and the savages, and I'm like, only in the most benighted white imaginations is 38th in Chicago anything other than a spot that it is, right? It takes such like aggressive imagination to paint that as like, because I don't think these cats saw Training Day or Colors to have a reference like, oh, they're flipping pigeons. Oh, this is, like, I mean, Ryan, I'm telling you, I had to argue with one of my former bosses in like 2022, right before Chauvin was found guilty, because he was getting his info from Alpha News and from
Yeah,
copwatch.com or
yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
not
yeah.
copwatch, but cops.com. And he's like, there's a machine gun turret up there and blah, blah, blah. It's like, that's Billy Briggs with a camera, you ass. Like, I work in that neighborhood. I go there, I respond to calls there. We get sometimes we get barbecue, sometimes we get barbecue turkey, sometimes like we go to the coffee shop because that is our job as civil servants. And I'm trying to help my coworkers
Right.
who do not necessarily feel comfortable get more comfortable. And I'm trying to get young folks there to recognize that as much as I look like, I'm there to try to be a help, right? So that's how
Yeah.
you establish community, right? And so I said, hey, I've been here since 2017, and I was here before then. Like, I know the people here. I've got relationships with the people here. Because for a while they were making an overall quote safety call. The paramedics wouldn't come in because they felt uncomfortable, so they required a police escort. I was like, so meanwhile, citizens with chest pain, citizens with asthma, people having strokes and heart attacks, they are not receiving the care they deserve because of some white fright thing. And there was no there for me to say, hey, let's please stop this, because they just hid behind safety. So
Right.
for the police reform or for the consent decree, I don't know, because I don't know how much fundamentally they've changed. I don't know, like I don't know if they really understand how those officers killed a man without meaning to.
And I think that's like such a fundamentally the inability. No, that's not what I mean to say. The absence of wanting to know that answer is really all you need to know about the way whiteness operates.
Mhm.
Right? The fundamental, like, oh, we know what it is, drug use or whatever it is. There's no louder way to tell somebody that your life doesn't matter than to not care to find the answer to why you're no longer here. Right? Why you're not and for those that followed the case, people in Minneapolis were connected to that. I know are connected we're connected to George Floyd in very real ways. And he's not getting married to his fiance. His daughter doesn't have her father here. All of these things, like, to not want to know the answer to that question. How more clearly can you say it just isn't worth it? You don't matter. It's not worth our time. It's not worth our energy. I can't imagine a more clear way to say that than to not care about to listen to the professionals and tell you why this happened, and then to actively resist the training and the policies that might keep this from happening again. Right?
Well,
Like, that's
but even at the end of 2022, the doctors, like the emergency doctors who were in charge of training the police, they're both gone now, or at least not doing that position anymore. But they were both kind of suburban sheriffs, like volunteer sheriffs. So they were cop-minded doctors, and they were the ones who were talking about. They were still pushing the whole excited delirium thing. Someone's out of control,
yeah,
they're danger, but they never said what to do about it, right? And so
super
then
important.
after it was discredited, that's one of the things when I was testifying in the federal trial. One of the officers might have been maybe Tutal's lawyer. It might have been Officer Lane's lawyer. Was trying to get me to admit that excited delirium was a real thing. And I was like, I'm on the stand. It's a federal court. It's pretty intimidating. The whole system is weird. And I
Yeah,
was like, and what I'd said when I was getting prepped, which is what he was reading off a transcript, was excited delirium is bullshit. But I'm not, like I was like, I'm not going to say that in court, but I was trying to dance around it because if they could say it's real, then they could say this guy died of excited delirium. And my point is that's not a real thing. It is
Right.
attached after the fact when people die when they've been restrained by police or medics, right? That
Right.
you and I can say, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it's like, to me, whenever I've heard that, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I remember hearing that during the trial, you know what I mean, things like that, where I'm like, it sounds like what you're saying is that people, like you said earlier, human beings don't like to be choked. They don't like to be have their chest kneeled on, or in the prone position on the ground. Like that sounds like a pretty natural response to have to this this thing. And that, it seemed like a cop out.
Well, but I what I also think it ignores, and this is where I argue this too for a lot of the like for my coworkers, for all of us, is that, but this is where I say the training is essential. When we come across somebody in crisis, somebody who is too high, too drunk, having a mental health issue, a diabetic, someone with Alzheimer's, schizophrenia, like, and they like if I come up to you and say, "Hey, man, how you doing?" and you start growling or licking the ground, or you've already told me all I need to know, which is that you and I are in different universes right now, right?
Right.
So most firefighters, because we don't have, because we're not charged with transporting the way the paramedics are, we're not police officers. We basically get good at just being like, oh, okay, let's talk. Let's, like be chill.
Being human with each other.
Trying to, right? But that if someone needs to go somewhere, if we need to, like I had a call where a guy was way too methed out and was trying to stab whatever he thought was in his hands in front of his girlfriend and their child and the girlfriend's dad. Like this was like, these are dangerous and chaotic scenes. And he did not know what was going on. So us giving him lawful orders, right? You could tell my dad, who's got Alzheimer's now, you could say, "Sir, put that down." He won't know what he's holding because he doesn't know where he is. Right.
Sure.
And that is my point. I write about that a lot in the book. Like that is the piece. And I've had to watch, or I've watched all the body cam from all the officers, and George Floyd was, whether he was just high or just drunk or both, like watching the video inside the store, but you're allowed to be drunk and high in America. Like, and so
I was gonna say you can be drunk and high and text military planes on signal group chat.
But
Apparently,
I'm saying, like from the very beginning of that call, when the first officer went up to him, it was clear because he was slurring, he was nervous, he was panicked. He'd already told them, and he wasn't trying to run away, he wasn't trying to drive. He
wasn't a threat.
He was, and that's where we get to what you were saying, like, but if you can only see black, you only see race as threat, right? Because all they had to do was say, "Hey, man, give us a real 20." Like whether or not he deliberately passed a bogus bill, it was accidental. Like you or me, they would have said, "Hey, man, just give us a bill."
Right. Just go pay for it. Let's be done with it. It's a wrap.
And if you watch the videos, like until Chauvin got on scene, when it was just the two junior guys, they did a pretty good job letting him sit down, letting Mr. Floyd calm himself, catch his breath. But he was saying, "I'm claustrophobic." He never said, "I'm not going to prison," or "F you." He was apologetic. He's like, "Please, man." I mean, from before they like, so this was someone who was having a crisis. There was no hurry to rush him away. But that's a matter of flexibility. And for the police and that training, and with two young officers and the senior officer coming in shouting, like, "Don't get punked by some street guy. You got to buck up." All that male bullshit, or all that, cop or authoritative, not just police officer, but all that authoritative bullshit leads to people overreacting and acting badly. And from the time Chauvin came up and said, "Let's go," and Officer J. Alexander King on the left side of the car started grabbing, and that's when George Floyd panicked because he was claustrophobic. And within 45 seconds, he was on the ground. And then 9 minutes later, he was dead.
And it's that's the beginning of the end right there.
And so listening to all the right wingers who cannot wrap their heads around the fact that the police killed somebody and are accountable for that killing. There was no fighting. It doesn't matter that he was high. It doesn't matter that he was drunk. It doesn't matter what he did 15 years ago.
Right.
right? It does not matter. And that's the part where it's the other side of what you're saying, which is that how many white people have watched dead black people over dinner time news and just ate their dinner? But then how many white people cannot swallow the notion that we are accountable as a society for the things that have made it really comfortable to be white in this society?
Yeah.